Hello, welcome to the Millionaire Woman Show, where we'll be discussing leadership, business, and human potential, inspiring you to live rich from the inside out. Unlock your creativity, stretch out of your comfort zone, break through your barriers, take inspired action, and achieve epic results. Now, here's your host, two-time best-selling author, speaker, and certified executive coach, Deborah Kasowski.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Millionaire Woman Show, where we talk about leadership, business, and human potential. And today, I am so excited. We have Nicole Holland. She helps busy CEOs increase their visibility exponentially to create greater impact, influence, and income. Proud to have been on Huffington Post as one of the 50 must-follow women entrepreneurs in 2017. Nicole inspires entrepreneurs all around the world through her popular podcast, the Business Building Rockstar Show, and an annual online summit, the Business Building Rockstar Summit. And I was introduced to Nicole while I was listening to podcasts, while I was running some stairs, and I'm like, man, she would be awesome for this show. So please welcome and join me in welcoming Nicole Holland.
Woo! Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming on. I'm so excited to have you. And fellow Canadians, so this is going to be a Rockstar podcast of Canadians today.
Indeed.
So I'm just going to jump right in because I'm really curious when I hear about people starting podcasts or starting programs. What inspired you to start the Business Building Rockstar Show?
Yeah, so I actually had I was never a podcast listener. I really didn't even know what a podcast was. And you mentioned my summit. I do a summit every year. 2015 was the first year. And the summit is all about bringing together resources for entrepreneurs who are really just starting out, or many entrepreneurs who are in the biz already, but looking to learn about new marketing strategies. And so I seek out the best of the best when I do this. And podcasting is a topic that a lot of people want to know about. And I found John Lee Dumas, and I invited him to be on the summit, and he said yes. And a conversation with John convinced me. And so that was it. I had there was nothing going on in my mind before. I never thought I'll be in journalism or anything like that. And I still don't feel like I'm a journalist. But yeah, it was just John Lee Dumas from Entrepreneur on Fire. We had a good chat, and he said, if you like interviewing people for summits, you'd probably really love podcasting, and it's easier and it's got bigger reach. And I'm like, really? And then I looked into it, and I hired him as my coach. I'm in one of his programs, and the rest is history.
And that's so awesome, because that's where I had first heard about you, is listening to John Lee Dumas on Entrepreneur on Fire. And you both have amazing shows. And actually, John's going to be coming on the show a few shows down the road. So I'm really excited about that. Just watching the expansion of podcasting, I never realized myself. I would pick one or two to listen to. I thought, this is pretty cool. And I was sitting in an audience. It was Sam Crowley who was talking on stage. And he says, I'm trying to remember, Every Day is Saturday is his show. And as he was talking, all I could think of is, hey, I could do that. But I never realized the reach. What did you learn about the reach as you got into podcasting?
Oh my gosh. Well, I realized it's a lot harder than a lot of people tell you it is. But I was committed to doing it. About the reach, it's hard. It's hard to get that reach. You have to actually work at it. I spent a lot of time on Twitter at the beginning, where I was cultivating relationships, and I was reaching out to people who I thought would be my ideal listeners. I was connecting with them, starting conversations. And if there was an opportunity for me to tell them about my show, I would, if it was natural in the conversation. Mm-hmm. And I really developed my loyal and core fan base through Twitter, but it took a while. And then as far as reach, like I had, originally I was hosting on a small startup called Sound, which they're wonderful. I recommend them if anybody is thinking about starting a podcast. They're great. There's so many different everything's so many different options, but the owner of Sound reached out to me and said, "Hey, we're just starting this hosting company. Will you give us a shot?" And I said, "Sure." So that was fun. And one of the really cool things is it's very high touch because they're small. And so he would report to me, he's like, "You have the most international following of anybody that we're hosting right now." And he's like reading all these different countries. So, wow. So people are listening to me like all over the world. And that was really one of the things I wanted to do, was be able to provide resources to people, even in third world countries or places that didn't have the means generally to get this high level information about how to do entrepreneurship. And so, yeah, I think that was really interesting. And then the other thing that's happened, it still have to pinch myself when I see things in social media from people I have no idea who they are, and they're making comments or like putting some inspiring thing in Instagram and talking about their morning routines. And this was the first time I had a woman in Instagram put a post about her success routines and how she starts her day, and with one of her favorite podcasts, her must listen to podcast. And it's either, or they are all of them, not either Gary V, Tim Ferriss, and Nicole Holland. Oh, and there was one more. I can't remember the one. I'm like, I actually contacted my Instagram girl and I'm like, "Is this spam?"
Pinch.
What's the deal with this? And she's like, "No, it's not spam. It's a real post." I'm like, okay, that's trippy. So yeah, when that kind of stuff happens, I'm like, that's amazing that I'm able to really touch people's lives and inspire them in a way that is so intimate and personal and real and immediate. That's really cool.
That must feel so rewarding to know that this idea that you thought, I'm going to give it a shot and see if it actually is going to do what I think it could do based on your conversation with John.
Well, and the funny thing is I really didn't have that many expectations for it because, again, I wasn't a podcast listener. I mean, I was a student. I was like, okay, I'm going to do this because it makes sense. And I trust him. I believe him. And it makes a lot of sense. It was very logical. But in terms of I didn't have many expectations about how I did not think podcasting would become like the primary aspect of my business, which it now has. Mm-hmm. I absolutely love podcasting, but it was just like, okay, I'll try this out as a marketing strategy. Yeah. So what's interesting though, is that was my vision for like longer term, 5-10 years. I wanted to be out on bigger stages. I wanted to be able to reach more people. Like that's been my vision, but I didn't think that I could do it within 6 months. I didn't think that within, 9 months, I would be named as one of the top entrepreneurs to follow in 2017 with people like Marie Forleo and Danielle Laporte and Dory Clark. And I'm like,
so also, when did you start?
Is this a joke?
When did you get started in podcasting?
March.
Wow.
Yeah. So we're recording this right now in December and we're talking March, like not even a year ago.
Phenomenal. So what opportunities have come out of podcasting for you?
So many relationships. Like the base of my business and everything in my life is all about relationships, and the relationships that I've been able to start, nurture, and grow through not through podcasting, but because of podcasting. I have no words to describe it. I went to a podcast movement in Chicago this year, and there I met Chris Krementos, and he is producing a movie. It's a documentary called The Messengers about podcasting, which is really exciting. Yeah. And he also puts on a lot of different live events. And one of those events, it's called PodFest. And this year it's in Orlando, or this coming year, it's in Orlando, February 23rd to the 25th. And it's for independent podcasters. And because of our connection at Podcast Movement, he contacted me and said, I'd love to have you speak at PodFest. Are you interested? And I'm like, yeah. And I'd never, I've not done any on stage presentations as an adult. So It was because of being there and connecting, and, he's listened to my show and he likes my energy and he knows about the summits that I do. So because of all that, he just made that offer without me having to pitch. So that's definitely something really cool. And I mean, I get people contacting me saying, how can I work with you? I don't even know what you do, but how can I work with you? Because they're listening to my podcast and they want support. So countless ways. We could spend a whole 2 hours talking about how this has been just integral in how my life is today.
Well, Nicole, it's definitely about your energy, because you give off such a wonderful energy, and just listening to you on your podcast, you engage your audiences, you pull them in, you ask some of those questions that put people on the spot, and they're open to the sharing. And I love how you kind of just open it gently into that conversation.
Thank you.
What are 3 of the greatest lessons that you have learned from your guests?
So I knew you were going to ask this, and I'm just going to look at my notes because I really had to think about this, because I learn lessons every single day. And I was like, how can I distill this down? So what I came up with is, number 1, that the little things don't go unnoticed. And this is not something that I've been told. This is something that I've learned by practice. I like to send thank you cards, for example. Most people don't do that. And people appreciate it. I'll get tagged in posts on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook where people take a picture and say, wow, thanks so much. Or, wow, you really treat your guests so great. And I'm like, it really just seems like common sense to me. And it's not a big thing, but those little things, they add up. Whenever I want to reach out to somebody who's been a guest and ask them for a favor, it's not even a question. So here I'm able to pick the brain of people who've been my mentors and people who, I never thought I would be able to call friends, who now I do. And it's because of those little things. So that's one thing. Another is the only thing stopping you is you. And I think we all know this, but we get stuck in the moments. And we forget sometimes that everybody goes through it, and I read something about podcasting, an article a while back, a blog post from Tim Ferriss, where he was saying that people are always saying, well, you're Tim Ferriss, of course you have a following, you this, it's like, I didn't start out with a following, I built it. And I think that's the thing that my guests reiterate to my audience over and over and over, that nobody just starts as a success. It's the people who are willing to fail and keep going on no matter what, and try again and try again and try again until they get it right, tweaking and testing. Those are the people who find success. And it's possible for everybody. There's nobody in the world who legitimately cannot be successful in anything they want to do.
Nicole, I'm just going to interrupt here for a second, because some of the people that I have met and listened to, they're all talking about the 4 people in the room, and 3 of them were family members, and being able to push through that. And I was thinking about this morning about how do people move that thought process. And I know you have one more for us. I don't want to interrupt the train of thought, but when you first started, thinking about who's listening out there, and seeing these people who have started with 4, but now they have thousands of people in their rooms.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, I'm that person, when I just quit my job pretty recently. It's been, we're recording this on December 21st. December 28th will be my 2-year mark from quitting my job as a correctional officer. So when I quit my job and decided to start my business, I quit cold turkey. I didn't have a plan in place. I just was like, I can't do this anymore. It's killing me. Boom, I quit. And then I was like, I think it's time to figure out what to do. And as a correctional officer and somebody who'd been in social services before, first of all, I was not tech savvy at all. Second of all, I knew nothing about the online space. I live in a pretty small community. I was a ghost. I was a ghost, when you're working with bad people every day, you don't want to say, hey, here I am on social media and go come find me.
Yeah, for sure.
I was not a public person. And so having to go become a public person very, very quickly was really challenging, and it was really scary. And I went from 0 to, I don't even know. I think between people who are following me on social media, listening to my podcast, and reading my emails, I'm probably reaching at least 20,000 people. Yeah, at least. I think there's probably more.
And all since March. That's incredible.
I quit my job almost 2 years ago. And then it took me about 6 months to kind of get solid on where I was going and to establish that I was doing the summit that launched November 1st, 2015. So that was really that was where my business started, November 1st, 2016. So it's been just over a year that's happened in and when I started the summit, I started from I had a list of 200 people, but it was just the wrong fit. It wasn't intentional. So I scrapped it and started from scratch November 1st, 2015 with a list of 0. So
amazing growth.
Yeah.
Growth. So you have one more great lesson to share with us from what you've learned from some of your guests.
Yeah. And I guess this kind of overlaps the last one because I was going on a bit of a tangent there, but nobody started singing to a full stadium. So I hear from entrepreneurs often, well, I tried webinars, but it didn't work. Nobody showed up, or I just had one person, or I only made one sale on this, or, even with podcasters, I see all the time that people are, oh, I'm starting a podcast. I'm so excited. And then 6 months down the line, you're like, where's the podcast? Oh, well, it was too hard. Or, oh, well, nobody was listening. Or I didn't get enough downloads. Or there's always some excuse. And I think that really does go back to mindset, any of these excuses. But in case that people actually believe, it's not just an excuse, but they actually believe they have to stop because it's not good enough or not fast enough growth, or they're comparing or whatever, that everybody started with the 4 people in the room, or in my case, 0 people in the room. I got 2 cats. So, nobody started singing to a full stadium. And if that's really your dream, then you have to keep on singing the small dive bars.
Yeah. And what I find is, if you're coming in the mindset that, oh, it's all about the downloads versus how many people's lives I can touch today, it's going to make a big difference. Because I've had people, message me about a YouTube video and say, you know what, when I'm having a bad day, I just go to Deb's YouTube channel because I know she's going to have something there. And awesome. I have to say, I do the same thing, because I'll go to Nicole Holland, I'll go listen to John Lee Dumas, and I'll say, hey, what are they saying today that's going to get my mind back on track? So it's really about what people are putting into their mind, about whether that mindset is going to stay on track or just say, you know what, it's not working.
Yeah, totally. And it's such a gift to be able to be in that position to provide that support. And I'm not special. You're not special. John's not special in the way that we were deemed, brilliant. We are brilliant. We're all brilliant. But
we like to think so anyway.
I pronounce you brilliant and you are worthy of giving advice and sharing and supporting people. No, we're all just normal people who decided to share our message. And in today's, it is easier than ever. I mean, if Facebook Live was around really the way it is now and available, it wasn't available to me a year ago. If it was available, who knows? Maybe I would have, taken to that. Maybe not podcasting. I tested out Periscope. It wasn't for me, but there's so many different, and now Instagram, there's so many live broadcast opportunities that anybody who has an internet connection and a single device, whether it's a computer, a phone, or whatever, you have a voice, and there's no excuse not to use it.
And I'm glad that you said that, because so many people are like, well, who would listen to me? And they hold themselves back when we know that just taking this step, and if you're impacting one person's life, that ripple effect, because then they're going to share that message with other people, and it's going to be continuous. It's going to grow.
I think back to a movie in the, I think early 90s. I don't think it was in the 80s. I think it was early 90s, but Pump Up the Volume with Christian Slater. And he was, he lived, he was a high schooler, and he lived in his parents' basement, and he had a pirate radio station. And it's been forever since I watched this, but it's like Dirty Harry, or not, no, Harry, something Harry, or it was very perverse, but he just turned on this, this radio, and it was all about him just processing and him just sharing and talking. And he didn't expect that anybody was listening. And then, he started a movement. And I think that's what it's all about. If you're worried about the fame, if you're worried about people listening to you, then you're in it for the wrong reason. You just have to share. You just have to know, here's what I have, here's the value I can share. So even if it's like knitting, maybe you knit, you didn't start knitting like an expert, you had to learn. So even if you're passionate about knitting and you just hop on a mic, or, turn that live video on, and you just start talking about why you care about knitting so much and how you got started, and you just consistently start sharing your voice, people will listen. And here's a thing too, that I think a lot of people are surprised about, and I'm always surprised that people are surprised about this. Most people are not going to acknowledge you. Most people are not going to tell you they're listening to you. Most people are not going to comment or respond to your email, but they are listening. And I think a lot of people expect that, oh, well, if you're listening, then you're going to respond. You're going to let me know you're there. No. Almost never, nobody's going to respond, but they're listening. And sometimes I hear from people who've been following me for a year, and I had no idea. But when they contact me, it's from the heart. And so I think if you have something to share, and we all do, we all have something to share. And if you're thinking, oh, I really care about knitting, but I don't want to make this my life's mission, I don't want to share that forever. Who cares? Stop sharing it when you stop feeling inspired to share it, shift gears, share something else. But share even if nobody's listening.
Mm-hmm. And when I first started speaking, and I love how you brought this up, but when I first started speaking, I was talking with a coach, and I said, I would wonder if I'm supposed to do what I'm doing, because I'd go up on stage, I would speak, I'd go to the table, and you'd stand there, and maybe 3-4 people would come up in a room of 200, and you'd be like, did I really bomb this? And what she explained to me is, 50% of your room is introverts. They're not going to come talk to you anyway. And the other 50, they could be extroverts, but they might just talk amongst their friends, and they're just not up to coming up to you. But the 3 or 4 that were impacted, that I should be just focused on, that it changed one person's life, because you don't know who else is sharing that message after you've shared it, and that they are listening. And, it took me a while to process that, because at first you're thinking, well, if nobody comes talk to you after, you must have really screwed up, and I realized it wasn't the case, but it took me a while to get out of that headspace and realize that, if I just go and give my all, and like you said, people are listening, and it also is about those little things, those messages, and that know that you are a messenger and being part of that movement. So what I want to know now is, how did you grow your business? Because I know you're stepping on stages and doing all this exciting things, and also not only how did you grow it, but what did you have to do to change your mindset?
Oh, okay. Well, let's start with mindset, because that's always the first thing. And I actually put together a challenge for people for free to help them with that, to go through Napoleon Hill's book, Think and Grow Rich. It's a powerful book, but it usually needs some dissecting. And right now I'm like shifting around my website, so it's not actually up. But if anybody is interested in that, you can definitely get in touch, and I can give you access to that. But I was a life coach for a very, very long time previously, before working in corrections. And it was actually kind of the one thing led to another, which is how I got into corrections. It was a very bizarre and twisty road. But so I know I know how mindset works. But when you're in a situation that's got so much momentum of negativity behind it, it's really hard to see the forest for the trees. And when I quit my job, I was extremely sick. So like I was not able to walk some days. I was in extreme pain. I was in emotional distress. Like I had so much anxiety. I'd never had anxiety in my life. And I used to do crisis support. I mean, I've seen it all. But it was in this last part of my career there where I started it was crazy. I was just so sick. I was anxious. Everything was just wrong. I was at the lowest point in my life. And I knew that I didn't want to live like that. And I knew I didn't have to live like that, but I didn't know another way. And I got to the point where my shift there when I quit was, I'm willing to work at McDonald's if I have to and flip burgers rather than come back into this place. And it was that point where I knew it's time to go. Like I can't put it off. And from there, it was a process, just an everyday process, just being aware. I think awareness of really the present moment, where you're at, and a gratitude, being appreciative. When I was a correctional officer and I was in such a toxic environment and I was so unhappy and I was so in pain in every way, all I could focus on was the pain. All I could focus on was the trauma. All I could focus on was the atrocities that were happening that I couldn't do anything about. I couldn't fix. I couldn't affect anything in a positive way. And that's all I was aware of. It was just little glimpses that I would get of, there is a life outside of this and I can have it if I want, just little glimpses. So it was more of a desperation space. Once I got away from that, it was just a very intentional process to every day focus on what's good. Okay, fine. I feel like garbage. That's a given. I feel like garbage. Is there anything that's good? Oh, I love my house. I love my house. Oh my God. Oh, it's sunny outside. And it's just those little things that it started with, to where, you grow from that. And I was able to grow from that, but being very intentional, very present and gracious to other people, grateful for everything, nothing is too small. That's the way that I shifted my mindset and continue to every day. I mean, it's not like it got there and it's done. Like, no, I have definitely those feelings, like you said, like you get up on stage and you're like, oh, only 3 people came. And I have to, in that moment, if I think something like that, oh, only 3 people came, that's where I'm able now to really jolt myself and be aware, 3 people came. I really am excited that 3 people came. Wow. These 3 people made the things they said, the things they shared. Wow, that's so amazing. Wow, this one person that came, it's like, I can't wait to work with them. And so then you just kind of go on an upward. You get some momentum behind you and you move up, opposed to having that momentum that pulls you down. Does that answer? I know it's a little bit of a tangent there. So,
so mindset, changing that shifted your whole way your business went.
my whole life, of course. Of course, mindset's everything. You can be, millionaire, right? You can feel like a millionaire before you have $1 million. And the problem with most people getting to $1 million or beyond and beyond, even close to $1 million, is they always see what they don't have. They want, and I get into, or actually I don't anymore. I used to get into discussions with people all the time, and now I'm like, I can't be bothered with those discussions. But people would say like, I'd say, well, you need to work on your mindset, and, here's what we need to clear, and, here's some ideas and affirmations and what have you. And they'll say, well, I'm doing all of that and it's still not working. Really? Well, right there, I'm doing all of that and it's still not working means you're focusing on the fact that it's not working. Oh, well, I want $1 million and I've been working really hard and I've been putting my attention on that and, really focusing and visioning and affirmations and doing the work, and I still don't have it. It's like, yeah. So every day you're realizing you don't have $1 million. That's what you're lacking. You're not there. It's going to take you down in momentum. So you can start feeling like you have $1 million by appreciating, by getting into that mode of what would you do or what will you do when, not what would you do if. What will you do when? And just remembering it's on its way. That's something that Dr. Wayne Dyer used to always say. And he was a great mentor for so many years. And that was something that really stuck with me is just, it's on its way. Everything you want is on its way. As long as you focus on what you want. When you focus on what you don't want, then that's on its way too. So where you put your attention is what will manifest eventually. You just have to be consistent. And every time you're aware that something hasn't manifested, you are resisting that manifestation and pulling in the opposite of what you want.
And I think what you touched on is when they say, I'm doing all that and it's not working, is that they're also maybe just doing it as a task versus being emotionally connected to what they say that they want.
Right, because they're looking at that outcome. Okay, I want that. Okay, well, I'm doing what I'm doing it, but exactly, they're not emotionally connected, and everything that they're doing is to get that goal. I'm doing this because to get that goal. I'm doing this because to get that goal. They're not in the moment appreciating the process. And that's all life is. It's a process. I mean, we're born and we die. And if we're not enjoying the process along the way, what's it all about, right?
Exactly. And the Millionaire Woman Show is about helping people live rich from the inside, and then outside, all of that will come, whatever that is for them. It's very individual, but it's about living rich first.
Absolutely.
So what advice would you give to someone who is working a day job with a business off the side of their desk?
Yeah. So another one that I made a note about, because I was like, oh, this is a bit of a stumper. So the note that I put was, know why you're doing it, because it will get hard and you'll want to take a break or stop. You need to be extremely organized to prioritize your business. So that why about what you want is really important, and you have to hold that and again appreciate into that, and also be really organized. It's funny because a lot of times people think, oh, well, I'm juggling a family and I'm juggling a side business, I'm juggling my job, and it's so difficult, and I should maybe get a break because I'm doing all of this. And it's like, you're just preparing yourself to be a full-time business owner, because if you think that's, you have the stability of the job and you're doing, it's actually a step towards when you have to manage it all and you don't even know what you're managing half the time. So the more organized you can get, the more focused on your goals and intentional, the more you can make specific time. I like to recommend people plot things out on their calendar. If they say, well, if I get up at 4:00 in the morning, then, might get an hour and a half in before the family gets up, blah, 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 blah. Okay, great. So let's make the most of that time. Don't just be up working on your business. What are you going to do? Oh, well, I want to write a book. Great. So can you devote 15 minutes every morning to writing? I want to, do a podcast. I want to do this. I want to have this. I want to have that. Great. So let's figure out what steps you need to take to get there, and then break those steps down into teeny tiny chunks that are manageable and are not going to drain you. Because you definitely need to recognize all of those things you're doing. And when you're starting a business on the side, you don't have to go from 0 to 60. Start with, okay, the end in mind. This is the vision. This is the goal. Now break it down. What are some things I can do right now to start building that foundation? You're in the best position when you're working and you have that stability, and you can do it on the side to build the foundation. But most people want to skip the foundation and jump right to the glory. And if they're trying to do that, it's like being on a hamster wheel that you're never going to get to that little house in front of you.
So what would you tell someone when they're working, they have all these things that they're balancing, and they start dedicating that 15 minutes a day, but they're like, it feels like it's going to take forever?
It might. And is that okay? Again, life's a journey. It's a process. Yeah. Why be in a rush? If your goal is too far in the future and you don't feel like you're ever going to get there, then you need to chunk it back and look at what's a goal before that. What's a step towards that, and make that a goal? What's a step before that? You can chunk it down and break it down and move it back as much as you have to. And again, when people focus on that thing that's so far ahead and they want that big glory without the work, and that's the thing, is it feels like work to a lot of people. They think, oh, it's so tough, and and the thing is because you're making this goal unattainable. You don't have the resources, you don't have the skills, you don't have the relationships, the foundation. So bring it back. What's one thing? Start there. Make a goal very clear and attainable and measurable, and then work to that. And then once you get there, as you're moving towards that, the next goal is going to become very clear to you, because you have the long-term vision, but you have to break it down into the shorter term. And every time it's a milestone and you cross that, great, what's the next thing? Great, what's the next thing? And now you're building this solid foundation from which you're going to be able to leave your job and feel amazing and not overwhelmed.
So along that journey and bringing it back, have you, when you work with the entrepreneurs that you work with, have you caught them in the comparison trap?
Everybody.
Everybody's doing.
Everybody does it. Everybody. And the more I've been up leveling and the more high end, if you will, the more successful my clients are. Like when I started, I was working with people who weren't already in business, or they were just trying, right? As we're growing in our own business, I think we started attracting people to us, clients to us at different levels of their business or whatever it is, whether we're, in the relationship sector or the business sector or whatever. We're always, as we grow and we improve, we're getting higher and higher level clients. And that's like sometimes really shocking to me, because I think, oh, these people have it all together, and they have the same issues as people just starting out, just they're manifesting in different ways.
Yeah. And I find that very interesting, because I've caught myself even in those own assumptions that I am surprised that something that I think that I could just walk through, that someone at a different level is fearful of. And then once I caught that, I have to step back and say, wow, you actually were very courageous, because that was huge for you. And there's other things they might think, well, Deb can just do that, but I would be fearful in a different way. Yeah. So it's to be able to recognize that we're all along that journey. So many of the entrepreneurs that you have interviewed, and even sharing from yourself, Started from nothing. What has been your most memorable story?
Memorable story.
And you're okay to share bits of, but I'm sure that there's a certain story or a certain interview that stands out in your mind of somebody who started with nothing and struggled. And it could be your own story there, Nicole.
You know what? I've interviewed over 200 extremely successful entrepreneurs by now. And and we're talking a very short period of time. And worked with clients. I mean, like every day, honestly, I have to pinch myself. I'm like, holy heck. So maybe what would have seemed like a big thing a couple years ago, now I'm like, that's just another day. So I have to say that right now, what's in my mind is I just listened the other day to an interview from two friends that I connected. Dr. Jeremy Weiss, he has a podcast called Inspired Insider, and he interviews e-commerce founders and about their journey and how they built the business and all this stuff. And I introduced him to my friend Brian Goulet, who I've also interviewed a couple of times. And he and his wife Rachel, they own the Goulet Pen Company, which is they sell fountain pens. And I'm addicted now. Like I'm re-addicted to fountain pens. That's all I'll use now. So I order all my pens from them. But they're online. So he has a very fascinating story about how he started, and literally from nothing. And now, like, it's insane. Like their business has wow. It's big, and it's pretty impressive. And he really shared, it was a 90-minute interview, which normally I'll look at, I'm like, I'm not listening to something that long, I'll like listen to a bit so that I can say, hey, okay, here's some feedback, thanks, I liked it or whatever. I could not stop listening, and I wish it would have been longer. Brian really got into step by step how he started in his living room with his wife. And now they're outgrowing their, I forget how big, warehouse, and they have over 40 employees. And I can't even think of stats right now, but it's insane. And so I find his story extremely inspiring. And yeah, I think just all the different stories, I take things from it, but I can't think of one. Like, yeah, sorry.
That's okay. But what is it that inspired you the most out of some of these stories? What is it? Is it the struggle? Is it what is it that demonstrated that, wow, this story is powerful?
The energy. It's just, for me, it's listening and being in the moment. And I think that's why people say I'm a good interviewer. It just comes really natural to me. Same with coaching. Like, it just always came really natural to me to be curious about somebody else's story and process. And I guess I listen with open ears, and I take away appreciation. But beyond that, like, I don't know. It's the story. It's like when it ends, and then the next one begins. And I just always like to really be in the moment.
Yeah. And that's really important. I'm glad that you mentioned that, because that's probably one of the biggest communication things that people need to catch hold of in their businesses, so that they can truly build the relationships that you were talking about, even if it's on Twitter, or even if it's on Instagram, about really paying attention to those relationships, but it's through active listening. What has been the greatest thing that you have picked up through listening?
Again, I don't know what has been. There just isn't one thing. Yeah. Relationships, really, that's what it boils down to, is relationships, and choosing not to be in a relationship, right? Like being an active listener means that you're honoring the other person, you're giving them attention, and you're also honoring yourself about, is this somebody that you want to continue conversation with, or is it somebody who is, like they say, people come into your life for a season or a reason or something like that. Maybe you don't want to have another conversation beyond that first one. And I think we realize that and can part ways in a really warm and healthy way when we are actively listening and when we're engaged and when we actually care and we're not just waiting for that next thing, like, okay, well, just I'm listening, but I'm not really listening. I'm thinking about what I need to get at the grocery store. I'm thinking about the next thing I want to tell them or anything like that. Like when you can really be present and just receive and hold space and share an authentic moment, I think you can really easily find those people who are going to be a right fit with you for whatever, whether it's a romantic relationship, a business relationship, or otherwise, and really easily find the people who are not.
So as your business is growing, how have your relationships changed?
That's something that I struggle with. I have been struggling with it, and I have been recognizing that. It's been very unintentional on my part.
Yeah.
And because relationships matter to me, I have a tendency to try and hold on to relationships that really aren't serving me anymore or aren't serving the other person. Like the relationship is not over, but it's like that last chapter. And I have a really hard time sometimes recognizing that. And sometimes I'll think, I haven't heard from this person for a while. And then I'll go check up and be like, hey, how are you? Just checking in. And then sometimes I'll get a little offended. I'll be like, why aren't they, engaged? Because they used to be very engaged. We used to have conversations all the time where, a client used to be, really excited to work with me. And now they can't even, acknowledge that I exist. I'm like, what's going on? And that's what I have to realize. Wait a minute. This is all perfect. Everything is perfect. Everything is as it should be. And there's no need to force anything. And the more I'm able to allow for old relationships to move on, I also find myself bringing in new relationships with people who are exciting for the next chapter. And, I think that's a challenge for me sometimes to figure out, is this something to let go of, or is this something to advocate for? But as I'm even saying it out loud and processing it, generally it is something to let go of. And then the new really amazing relationships come in. And the thing is these past relationships were great relationships, but apparently they're not right now. And I think that's something to just be aware of.
Mm-hmm. And also not to take everything personally, because sometimes those people are processing and dealing with their own things, and they may have nothing to do with you whatsoever. And this is something that I've learned along the way too. But I was very curious about how it has impacted you.
Yeah, the relationships, just everything in my life all comes down to relationships. So I can give you an example. I did this summit last month, and there were some of the speakers who, they said flat out, I'll be on your summit, but I'm not going to promote. It's just not, for whatever reason, they're not going to promote, whether it's, they just don't promote or whatever reason, regardless, they weren't going to promote. And I said, absolutely. So one of those people was Dory Clark. And I don't know if you know who she is, but she's a brilliant thought leader in the marketing space, in the branding space. And she also is a political consultant for CTV. She was on TV a lot in November up here in Canada. But she was not to promote. And one day I woke up and I, I checked my phone and I had all these sales coming in, and I was like, whoa, it's a good day. And then I looked at the affiliate and it said Dory Clark. I'm like, well, that's odd. And then I looked at the next one, Dory Clark, and the next one, Dory Clark. And I'm like, what's going on here? And so I went to my inbox and I searched to see if there was an email from Dory Clark, because I'm on her list. And there was indeed. And she had written an email highlighting me and my summit as something she was impressed by and recommended to her audience. And I was like, whoa, that's really cool. It's really cool. And this is not something that was expected. This is not something that was asked for. This is not something that, I even knew was going to happen. She just did it because she wanted to. And I think that's what's really cool, is that as for me personally, as my business builds and as I provide value to more people and to more higher level people, those people are generous. That was something also that right from the beginning was interesting to me. When I started out and nobody knew who I was, it was the people who were a few steps ahead of me that were the most challenging to deal with and were the most stingy, if you will. And it was the people at the top who are the most generous. I mean, so many people have supported me that I never would have in a million years thought, and they have, and they continue to, and it's incredible. So that's how the relationships have really impacted me.
Because the most influence that you can have is having someone endorse you versus you saying, hey, look at me, so that's very, very powerful.
And that's really one of the things that I do. I mean, I can talk about my strengths and, of course I'm out there and I'm here, I'm promoting myself by going on podcasts and promoting myself by social media and stuff like that. But I'm not big on, shall we say, hard sales or traditional sales. I really believe in client attraction and endorsements. And I just got an endorsement on LinkedIn the other day from someone. I didn't ask for it. I just happened to, I'm not on LinkedIn every day. It's one of those platforms I really want to get on, but I haven't put a lot of energy into it, and it's still a little ways off. And so I'll log in, maybe a couple times a week. And I logged in and I saw this message that I had an endorsement, and I'm like, oh, what's this? And I read it, and it was just so great. And it was because I'm providing value to people. Most people that I provide value to, they're never going to write something or say something, and that's fine. And I don't expect anything. And I think because I don't expect anything, people like Dory Clark or Bailey Richard or whoever, they do endorse me on their own accord without me asking for it. So.
And it is truly about, and what I hear you saying is, it's about trusting a process. And like, as you said, Wayne Dyer, it's on its way, but also being able to detach from that outcome without an expectation.
And not worrying about the how.
Yeah.
Just doing you. And it comes.
Yeah. Otherwise, people, I think where we struggle is we get hung up on the how, and we think, oh, it's not possible. And when we figure out that if we're just doing you, like you say, it's so much easier, because you're not trying to be someone that you're not. You're actually going with the flow, and the flow is what gets you to where you need to go.
I have to say, though, that for most people, getting to that point is not easier. It's actually harder. But once you get there, it's easy. And if you listen to people, like I'm sure other people on your show have talked about the same thing, if people who want to be living a rich life are listening to people who already are living a rich life, number one, again, it's just mindset. You can start living a rich life from living a poor life today if you decide you're going to do that. But that decision process is coming to that place. That's the hard part. Mm-hmm. Once you get there, though, the rest is easy. it's flow. And we can talk about this all day long. And if somebody doesn't have a personal experience with it, they're not going to understand it. Conceptually, logically, sure, but emotionally and in a kinesthetic way, no. And that's where I was at for a long time in my life, because again, I studied this, I was a coach, and of course I had experiences, but when the light switch switched, it was like everything shifted and everything could, and this might not make any sense, but I think it's, if you've been through that, you understand. And anybody who has not been through that yet, which is most people, that is the hard part. Getting yourself willing to be there and then allowing for it. And then you wind up like a bumbling whatever like me who can't put words together to articulate an experience. And it's like you like pass through some like, I don't know, force shield or something to another side. And you just stop attracting all the problems, and you stop attracting all the negative Nancys, and you stop living in that distress, and you live in flow.
And I know you said it was difficult to articulate, but I don't think there is any better way than what you have just now shared. And it's about stepping into the person that you're meant to be. It's really about not worrying about what everybody else is thinking and being true to yourself. And I really love how you described it, because it is an experience that people need to feel in order to get to that other side. So what is the number one tool that people should be using in their businesses and you see that they're not?
Acuity. Acuity. I'm not even going to say a scheduler, because some of the schedulers people use, I'm just like, this is just more complicated than it has to be. I am such a fan of Acuity scheduling. It is, if you're a service-based business owner,
yeah,
whether you're on your own or whether you have 100 people working for you, maybe not 100, but 20, 30, Acuity scheduling, it's like, it's amazing. It replaces the need for a receptionist. It replaces the need to message back and forth. It's like, I can't even rave about Acuity enough. And it's funny, I get messages all the time now from people who I've got to like convince. It's like, okay, seriously, just try Acuity, because they'll talk about their challenges with scheduling or the challenges with like this or that. And I'm like, this one tool will solve this problem, this problem, this problem. It'll solve like all these problems. And you're still like putting out there like, oh, well, are there any others? Like, what other tools are there? Like, I know there's a lot of calendar tools. Who thinks what's best? And it's like, just try it out. So anyways, I get pretty fired up about that. And then I have people like, just I think 2 days ago was the last time I got a message that they're always in caps. I don't know why, but everybody who writes me about Acuity, once they get on there and they're like, whoa, they write me always in caps, like, this is awesome. I'm like, I know.
I'm going to have to check that out.
Seriously, Deborah, it is, yes. Acuity scheduling. It'll change your life.
Awesome. Because I've been looking for a tool, and then I'll find a tool that I think is going to work, and then I test it and I'm like, well, you can't have varying schedules. Well, I'm not a 9-to-5 business, so that doesn't work for me, and I thought, okay, well, that we'll ditch that one and then try another one, and I'm going to check it out. So thank you for that.
It's amazing. Amazing.
All right. Some people think that there's cookie cutter solutions to building a business. What has been your experience?
So I also wrote a note to this because I was reading through these and I got inspired in the moment, and I wanted to make sure that what I was inspired at that time, I can say, because it was good. So I don't think, as I put, not at all. So I don't believe in cookie cutter. And that's kind of my message with the summit is there is no one size fits all, and you make your rules up as you go. Nobody can tell you what's right. If you look at the greats in our history that were change makers and innovators, all of them marched to the beat of their own drum. None of them were following what society was saying or their teachers were saying or anybody else said was okay. They all did things because they had to, because they knew something that nobody else knew. So what I wrote was that the idea of cookie cutters is one of the most painful and expensive lessons that most entrepreneurs learn. And it's one of the things that, as I started back in my coaching practice, I found really challenging, was that idea that I have to convince people that they can take a chance on me. Like people would say, oh, I want this, I want this, I want this. And I'm like, okay, cool, I can help you with that. And they're like, oh, but I've got burned before. I'm like, okay, so have I. We all have. I get it. And it's like, now I'm done trying to convince people, like, yeah, it's cool, just go somewhere else. But I think that that's because we buy into these marketing messages that, ooh, I have the solution and it's a simple system and all you got to do is X, Y, Z, and this is how I got here and now you can too. And people buy that every single day. Millions and millions and millions of dollars go into those promises, and they're empty promises, because those programs and strategies are for the few, not the many. And the other thing is, oftentimes, almost always, I mean, I've never seen an example where this isn't the case. You're going to get tools, you're going to get resources, you're going to get steps, you're going to get directions, but it's only a slice of the pie. You can't expect, again, to have that end thing, that dream that you want, by putting in a tiny fraction of what that person who you want to emulate has put in. And you never really know what's happening behind the scenes. And that's really why I started my podcast as well, to uncover those messages of what is it really like back there. And this is all fine and well that you're doing this today. And, we could talk about that all day long, but my listeners are struggling. My listeners are going, why is this not working for me? And I think because of that idea that there is a cookie cutter template or system or checklist. I mean, I know we all have to do that in terms of marketing to get the message out there. But when people believe that they can buy a solution, especially when people believe they can buy the solution and not actually go through the program or the process, but they're just going to buy something and poof, it's like they have it. And it's a very expensive mistake. It's a painful mistake. And it's a mistake that people take a long time to recover from a lot of times.
Yeah. And sometimes what I see with that is they buy the cookie cutter they think is going to be the whole solution, but there's a little piece missing and you need to spend a little bit more to get there. And then it's so forth and so forth. And then that's when they say, well, I've got burned. I don't know if I want to work with you. And willing to have that trust in someone again, when they've had that experience, can be challenging.
Definitely.
All right. How can our listeners be a business building rock star and stay in touch with you?
I'm so glad you asked. So sorry, I totally should have asked you this before we started.
Yeah.
I wanted to make a special URL for your listeners.
Absolutely. Bring it on, Nicole.
What would be a good end to the URL?
Well,
because millionaire is really long.
Yes, let's
Rich life.
Let's make it rich life.
Okay, rich life. So,
see, this is how we roll here on the Millionaire Woman Show, as well as business building rock star here, Nicole Holland.
I am usually way more organized. It's just an insane. I thought, it's gonna to be nice and quiet before Christmas. That is not the case in my world.
Well, I have to tell
Okay.
our listeners, we just booked this like yesterday. So I am just thrilled to be able to grab some of your attention for this interview. And because I do know how busy you are, and really appreciate the time that you can share some of the lessons in your growth with our listeners. And I would love for you to make an offering to our listeners, because they too will become a business rock star.
Awesome. So go ahead and visit bbrshow.com/rich life. And you're going to get my 6-step checklist, right? So I just said there's no cookie cutter, and there's no cookie cutter. But there are definitely elements that make somebody a great guest that podcast hosts can't wait to book and listeners can't wait to learn more from. And there are lots of things not to do. So if you want to learn how to get your message out in a bigger way through podcast interviews like this, I'd love to help you with that. That's what I really specialize in right now. And you can go to bbrshow.com/rich life. Sign up. All I need is your email address. I will send you that to your inbox, as well as over the next days, weeks, I'll go in depth more into each one of the strategies. Some of the things we talked about here, it's really about relationships and adding value. So yeah, bbrshow.com/rich life. And once you get that, you'll have my email address, and you can always write me back and connect with me that way.
Yeah, and share with Nicole what nuggets that you've gotten on the show, because she has been through the process. You can learn from this. And what we're trying to do here with those principles of leadership moving forward and business and all of these principles of human development is really helping you get to the next level. So I have one more question. And what marketing strategies do you think people should be tapping into, especially when the economy seems to be in a downturn? And one of the things that we do know is entrepreneurs create their own economy, but I wanted the Nicole Holland take.
Definitely. Totally agree with that. And I say that social engagement marketing is the place to be if you want to build a business in any economy, especially a down economy, because that's where you can create those intimate relationships really easily and effectively and authentically. So I know that there are people listening right now who feel like they know me by now. I mean, we've spent over an hour together now, or about an hour together now. And I know that there are people like, oh, I want to connect with her. And that's what you want to do. So when you're getting out there through podcast interviews, through social media, you're giving people a window into your life, you're sharing value, and you're making that connection. People will identify with your personality. If you're somebody they want to learn from, if you're somebody that they feel like they can trust or not, right? So definitely, I advocate for social engagement marketing, getting out there. Again, podcast interviews are what I'm really focusing on right now with clients. And of course, social media as well.
Yeah. So Nicole, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. And one of the greatest lessons to remind our listeners is that if you start with your mindset being in a place of abundance and starting to be grateful for everything around you, watch what happens. You will take stronger actions to go after some of those dreams you set for yourself. So don't forget to reach out to Nicole. Nicole, can you give a shout out for that URL one more time?
Absolutely. It's BBR Show, stands for Business Building Rockstar Show, bbrshow.com/rich life.
Thank you all for listening to the Millionaire Woman Show, where we talk about leadership, business, and human potential. We would love for you to give us a 5-star high five and write a review. Let us know how this podcast is impacting your life, because now that we're into the phase 2 of bringing on the guests, we want to expand the thoughts so that it can spread globally and create that ripple effect. And what I want you to remember is to go out and be the change. Implement some of the things that Nicole has shared with you. Be that change you wish to see in the world, as Muhammad Gandhi said, and go out and make today great. Thanks for being on the show, everyone.